Welcome to Men, Sex, and Tantra.
Discover what your parents, porn, and religion never taught you about being a man and having extraordinary sex. Get ready to have your mind blown and your world rocked. Hey everybody, it's Men, Sex, and Tantra, and guess what? This season, I thought y'all might want to know, what are women actually thinking? What happens when we pull back the curtain on how women are feeling, thinking, and their experiences that are really going on? And this series is going to be with, real women. That's so funny to say. What does that actually mean? But women who are not in the profession of sex coaching and all those types of things, but just actually like conversations with, I guess, regular women. Let's call them, maybe they're extraordinary women. I don't know. Don't want to label them. Women, other women. How about that? So, hey, Mandy, you and I were talking
Okay.
just a second ago, and you said there's something you definitely wanted to throw into the mix. So let's just start with that.
Yeah, I was thinking about being a straight woman, or straight enough. Like
Great enough.
like straight enough. Yeah, it reminds me of that line from that Charles Dickens novels that I haven't actually read, but it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Because the truth is, growing up female and surrounded by media and surrounded by pressure from other girls who hated their bodies and all of these things, I actually have had some of the most positive and balancing experiences of my life with men who just adored me and um appreciated me, did not have the same level of judgment that other women or people who were trying to sell me stuff had about the way I looked. It was lovely. Just like a lovely, lovely presence and really fun to be around. And then at the same time, um, you know, men are some of the worst folks, like the cat calling and the being creepy and the just all of the threatening, the dark side of all of it. So I was just like, oh man, isn't that it's just like an interesting irony for me that the spectrum was so wide.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of women I talk to, which is like, yeah, some have awesome experiences with men, some not so awesome experiences with men,
Mhm.
and sometimes the same one. So,
Yeah, yeah, a lot of that.
right? So when you said, I think men and, all the men on here know, and most people know that I actually adore men, which is why I do this show. But one of the things that I find is that this you know difference here, the Jekyll Hyde kind of thing, is really because of miseducation and things that we tell men they should be doing to be cool. Like I think about the cat calling, right? Like where do men learn that it's awesome to yell at a woman going down the street, hey, nice ass, or whatever they're doing? Like, where is that supposedly cool?
I mean, the worst I ever experienced that was in 1999 when I was an exchange student in Mexico. And what I really noticed is it did not feel sexy at all. It didn't feel flirtatious. It felt like they were dog catchers. Like I was walking alone and I wasn't supposed to be allowed out on my own. They wouldn't do it if I was with an older woman or with a man. And they seemed like they liked to do it in groups, like they did it for each other. So there's
Mm-hmm.
some kind of real dumb about it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, definitely the dog catcher feeling of dude, I don't know why you feel so entitled to control me. I'm just going to school. But
Yeah. Well, I think it's a cultural too, because like I've lived all over the world, and certainly when it comes to those types of things, a lot of Latin countries, Greece, there's a lot of countries where men are really forward, nipple pinching
yeah.
nipples, grabbing your ass, cat
hmm
calling, saying stuff, and it seems to be part of the culture, though not all men are doing it either.
Well, I was actually really amazed because I went back to the same city in Mexico where I went to school, 17 years later, and it was like hanging out with a relative that you really love who stopped drinking. Because there had been this like big feminist campaign in the meantime. I mean, I asked women about it. I was like, "What happened to the catcalling? This is amazing. This is wonderful. Like, you can just walk down the street now." And they're like, "Oh yeah, there was a campaign about it, and now they don't do it so much anymore."
Hmm.
And I was just like, "This is the best thing ever."
You know, and
So,
I'm pretty sure that I could ask women, and there'd be
mhm.
women who like it.
I have not heard anyone say that.
Yeah,
When I talked to women in Mexico too, they were just like, "Oh, I wish they would stop doing that."
yeah.
Even back then. I got catcalled in my own neighborhood last week though, that was weird.
Well, see, and I would think, I always think that, you know, it's kind of like when you're approached by the wrong, what you consider the wrong guy, it's never flattering. But when you're approached by
Mhm.
the right guy, it's flattering. And so there's
Well,
this accountability as women that we have that I always
yeah,
want to talk to as well. It's kind of
the
like,
right the right guy for me wouldn't yell at me though, so
okay,
that doesn't really make
yeah,
sense.
there you go.
Like,
And yet I know plenty of women who absolutely, if they're sitting in a coffee shop, whatever, having coffee, and some guy approaches them and says, "Hey, you know, how are you?" And he's the quote unquote wrong guy, they'll be put off and upset by it. Whereas if the right guy showed up and did that, it would be a totally different experience. And I think so. I'm coming back to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate for the men in the sense that there's a lot of confusion around that. Now, catcalling, sitting on the side with your buddies, drinking and just shouting like that, that's never a cool thing. We can just take that off the table right now, guys. Just, but like I said, there are women in other cultures that expect that too.
maybe, yeah, but like when I talked to women in 1999 in Mexico, they didn't like it. And you didn't see people like smile back when they did it because there was like a hostility to it. Like
Hmm.
women would kind of like duck their heads down and they wouldn't say anything. I would get pissed and scream at them, and then they would be surprised.
Yeah,
It was same as what happened in my neighborhood last week. Like the guy was like, "What?" I was
yeah,
just like standing, like just turned around in the middle of the street I was crossing, was just like, "Women fucking hate it when you do that. Stop doing it." And of course he pulled the thing, which you know is underneath the catcalling. He's like, "You know what? You're not beautiful. You ugly." I was
yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah, the
"Yeah,
takeaway.
yeah.
Then
Oh, I knew
the,
you. I knew you were like that. That's why I hated it."
yeah,
Uh,
the takeaway. And yet, like I said, I mean, from my experience, I've had both the hostility kind of catcall and the appreciative catcall, and they feel different. There's a big difference in those, and so once again, let's come back to the I feel the difference. You don't like it. Some other women like it. What's going on with that? You know, culturally and everything else.
yeah.
So it sounds like if men are when men are listening to this that if that's something that you do or have done or have thought about doing or think it's okay, it sounds
Mhm.
like erring on the side of not doing it is the best.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, I've also heard a really great guideline, which was if you do want to give a compliment and not have it be creepy, then combine the words like cool, awesome, or something on that level with something that the woman has control over. Like, oh, those are awesome boots. Or, like the way she did her hair or something, like the way she did something and not so much just the nice ass kind of compliments.
yeah.
And I thought, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, different territory. And once again, I come back to the whole thing like the guy that you think is hot that says, "Hey, cool boots," you're going to receive completely different than the guy you think
Mhm.
is not. And so, once again,
Yeah.
what's a guy to do? What if a guy wants to approach? So if a guy wanted to approach you,
I could tell you this story. I love this story
okay,
of the last guy I dated. Oh my god, the best. I feel like I need to give him. Okay, I'm gonna call him Janu because that means like sweetie in
okay,
Hindi. Um, I was in Costa Rica and I was walking into a national park. I was just like on the street, so I'm like walking alone on the street, and I just hear this guy behind me say, "Is this the way to the park?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just saw a sign for it. It's right here." And then we just started talking and didn't stop talking for 8 or 9 hours, which is when we started making out. And this guy was absolutely not like, I wouldn't say exactly like my type. He's much younger than me. He's an engineer. He drinks alcohol. I mean, he does all these things that I don't do. Oh no, I wouldn't have been looking for. But he was one of the things about him that was so amazing was he had this ability to like just sort of be with me without me feeling pushed by like any kind of undercurrent, like any kind of agenda. Like he obviously wanted to hang out with me, wanted to keep hanging out with me all day, but he didn't ever feel like he was trying to get me to do something or trying to get me to like him, trying to get anything. He was just enjoying himself. And he had a really good energy of like, I want to keep doing this. It was clear that he wanted to keep hanging out, but he wasn't trying to control me. I think that's the thing that really immediately starts to set off alarms if there's like a undercurrent going on of like, how do I get this woman? Like, how do I get her into bed? How do I get her to like me? How do I get her to not leave? Like just and how do I get her to anything? And instead, I mean, I think it was authenticity that made him so attractive after after several hours. That he
Yeah, I was
wasn't
going to
like
say, so
really
this
trying to get
went
off.
from like a casual, hangout, where's the park? He kind of tags along with you. Yeah, who
Mhm.
started the makeout? How did the makeout end up being part of the scenario?
Well, we just kept incrementally spending more time. Like first the park closed and they were like, "Well, are you hungry? Like let's get something to eat." And then we got ice cream and then we sat and we finished our ice cream and it was like, "Well, are you going to keep looking for a place to eat?" And then we kept walking around and then we didn't find a place, so we like, "Let's go both on the bus back to the other town and I'll take you to my favorite restaurant." And then we had dinner and then we just kind of kept talking
Who
and
was leading?
I don't I think I'd been living there for longer. So I knew more places to go, but it was kinda equal. I mean, I remember him saying like, "Oh, I love swings." And so we went over to this place where there was swings and we sat on swings and we talked. And then he was like, "Do you wanna walk on the beach?" And so we walked on the beach. It was easy, it was fluid. It just kinda went back and forth who was it felt like we were friends who had met up to go to the park. And that was like the part about it that was just so, oh, just treasure, fantastic. It was just so warm. And then yeah, eventually we were standing there on the beach like and it was just kind of getting like awkward because um before this had been married for 10 years. So this was like my first new person in 11 years that I was kissing and I'm just sort of like I don't know and he's
Who
younger than me
initiated
so
the,
like
yeah, who initiated the kiss? How did that?
he turned to me and he said he genuinely said, "So, do you want a kiss?" But it was he actually was sort of asking like, "What do you want?" I mean, do you want it was like both an invitation and a just sort of like, "What's up with you?" Which is great because he's a scientist. Um, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah," and then I just kissed him and it was great.
So if we break this down, this goes against all the quote unquote masculine rules and polarity teachings and everything that's out there about what men are supposed to do. Because number one, he was kind of soft on his approach. Number two, there was fluidity. He wasn't quote unquote leading you on the adventure of your life. Number
Yeah.
three, he asked you about kissing. So
Mhm.
there were so many like quote unquote don't do this if you're a man. And yet I can hear in
Yeah.
your laugh, I can hear in how you talk about it, I can hear all that, I can see it in your smile, that this whole
Yeah.
thing lit you up.
Oh, it lit me I'm still lit up about it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was only like a month-long thing or so. Um, but it was just like people say, like if you change your course by a few degrees in a long journey, you end up in a completely different place. And even though I didn't date this guy for very long, like I'm just like this guy right here. I love this guy. Like this person like completely changed the course I was on in terms of like what I think is possible, and just was just wonderful to be around. It was so interesting. I'll tell you something else too. I'll tell you something about engineers. They deserve more credit for being sexy people because they do not struggle with a bra strap. You know, they get that class. They know exactly how that class works. They just flick that thing right off. It's not hard for them. They design microchips. They don't give a shit. It's like, boom, thing is off.
That's hilarious.
Like a breeze went across my back. Just boom, it's just off.
Nice. And so then sexually, was he dominating, leading, or was it still fluid in sex?
No, he was actually very clear, like that he liked being surprised. So he was like, go ahead. He would, but here's the thing about like I don't really feel I like a lot of times I think people who think they're leading, like to me it feels like they're pushing or they're not attuned, they're not giving me any space to desire them back. They're just not giving me space. Whereas this guy would like flip really easily. And also he had this really fabulous like sort of non-attachment. Like if I needed to ask him a logistical question, um, like making sure he knew that you can't get massage oil on a condom because it'll make it break. Like, so I just like stopped to ask him that, and he was like, "Oh, no, I didn't know that." And then we like talked about it, and he wasn't like, "Oh, you're ruining the mood." He was just fluid about everything. He was really relaxed. He wasn't defensive. That was the nice thing. I think sometimes people get that idea of like, I have to be the leader, and then if you mess up their plan by being present in the situation, like throwing anything that they didn't expect,
Yeah.
and they get like they can't deal with it, and they get all huffy, and it's actually kind of childish. Um, Whereas, yeah, there's a lot of maturity in that fluidity, in that capacity to just roll with things and to respond to things in the moment, like just being very present, not being threatened by things. And I think in order to not feel threatened by surprises, you really can't be too attached to your expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, an expectation, if you're expecting to perform by having to expect
Hmm.
to lead and having to expect to make it all happen, then yeah, you're right. You can get thrown off your
Yeah.
game pretty easily if something comes up. Do you
Hmm.
describe yourself as more of a feminine woman, masculine woman? How would you describe your kind of vibe?
Mm. I mean, I think I'm naturally kind of feminine, but I'm also pretty I don't even know what that means half the time, like because like the idea, like, like a Russian idea of being really feminine is being able to endure really well. And, and then the sort of Victorian England completely made up idea of feminine is that you're just sort of helpless. Um, and then, like the Roman army had the fiercest animal they could think of on their shields to scare the crap out of their enemies. And it wasn't like a bear or a lion, it was a mother weasel, because
Exactly. They're fierce.
they're fucking scary, right? Like, and I think about that, like that mama bear energy, that's also femininity. So I'm not really sure what anybody means by feminine. But I'm also like, I think I'm generally, I don't know, like if you could see me, like I'm kind of slender and um yeah, I'm pretty femme looking.
Yeah,
Pretty,
it's a
pretty
funny
femme
question
looking.
though, right? It's a funny
Yeah.
question because I have so many. I mean, I can't tell you how many calls I've had from men that want me to help them with their masculinity, which is
Hmm.
always an interesting thing. I'm kind of like, what do you mean by that? And it's like, well, I might be too soft. I might be too not leading enough. I'm not alpha enough. And yet you were describing here this great experience with somebody who was
Hmm.
fluid. And I always talk about, and we talked about this in the very beginning before we got on the air, was the polarity debate that I had with this guy named Zach,
Hmm.
who just, who's the alpha guy who manages and leads and, makes the decisions and all that kind of stuff. And we're hearing a lot about polarity and we're hearing a lot about the confusion of that. And I think that we really are designed to be fluid. And if you look back at ancient tantra, the original tantric scripts, actually the woman was the action director because she births. I mean, what do you think birth is? Birth is a pretty action oriented kind of thing, right? Um,
Well, yeah,
so
no. the history of Western dating too. Like if you looked at like magazine advice from like the 1880s or so, there's like these tormented men being like, I really want to ask this woman if I can court her. And the advice column was just like, no, it's not your role as the man. You need to wait for her to invite you onto the porch. And if she doesn't want to, it's natural. This is just only natural that the woman chooses. You just have to wait. And like,
Right.
70 years later in the 50s, it's like, no, you can't ask a boy on a date. He has to ask you.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's natural.
very weird. Well, in the animal world, it's usually the men that are peacocking and looking beautiful to the dowdy females. They're trying to attract the dowdy female with their beauty.
The well camouflaged female.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, we've turned things on our head. And so I'll come back to this that basically we know that people are all different. I mean, there's no all women this, all men that, all anybody anything. That's a given. And
Yeah.
so for the men that feel like they are more less alpha than what the world's telling them to be, from your story today, that might be an okay thing.
Oh my God. Well, to me too, like some of that alpha stuff, it's like it reminds me of that Chinese parable about how like the oak is so strong and so tough and yet gets blown over in a storm that the bamboo just bends in.
Yeah.
The, the grasses survive it just fine. And I mean that sometimes that masculinity is so like stiff that it just comes across to me as like insecurity. Like it's just a whole list of shit that like the guy's not allowed to do. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, that's boring. Like,
so so what we're saying here is be you whatever that you is.
yeah,
Don't yeah.
yeah. And it's really interesting too, because this dude, I mean, in some ways is like very, very different. And plus my ex-husband is very, in some ways, like stereotypically masculine. Like he's very tall. He's sort of like broad shouldered and heavy and leaders, blah blah blah. Like he looks very masculine. And this guy was completely different because he was like more like my height and stuff. Um, but he was just blowing my mind left and right. And it was wild too. Like the things that I liked about him, um, I didn't expect, and it makes me feel like there's probably a lot of men who could leverage whatever it is that they do and have that be like the sexiest thing about them. Because like the thing with being an engineer and being able to
Right.
like get the bra off
Right.
effortlessly.
Yeah.
He was also like a professional researcher, um, and like an academic, and the way he gave compliments was so amazing. It was the best because he would be like, I've noticed that you point out when things are beautiful. I really like that. And then he gave like 5 different examples that he had noticed throughout the day of different times that I had done that thing, and it was so scientific. I loved it. Like I couldn't really argue with it. It wasn't one of
Science,
those.
yeah, scientific and it was personal about you, not just how
Yeah.
you looked.
And it wasn't some dumb thing like, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. I'm like, okay, that's objectively not true for one. And then two, like, that isn't even a thing. That's not like how would you even determine that? But you
So
can. I think
wait,
I
I'm sorry, Mandy, you were just logical there. You're a woman. Are you supposed to
I
put logic
know,
into this
right?
emotional experience?
Give me a minute. I'm gonna go cry in the corner, and then if
Okay.
after I finish my chocolate, I'll be back. You
The
can
other
do my
thing,
taxes for me.
the other thing you said that I thought was interesting is you said it was like hanging out with a friend. And so that's one of those things that men are never supposed to approach either. The friend zone, to be thought of as a friend walking in the park. And yet this friend led to make out and sex.
Yeah, that's amazing sex. I,
There you
well,
go.
I mean, I think to me too, like, what do we mean by friend? Like, I felt I felt fundamentally safe with him, even though maybe that's what I meant by friend. Like, I felt like I liked him and I felt safe with him, like
Okay.
immediately. And coming back to that, I mean, it was because he was not giving me the vibe that he was trying to get anything from me.
Do you think he was? I mean, do you think ideally
He,
he wanted to be with you, but he wasn't? gripped. I mean, he wasn't pushing that energy out. He was letting that feeling flow.
We actually talked about it later, and he said that it didn't really occur to him that we could hook up until maybe like an hour before we did.
Oh, okay. So he really wasn't in that agenda. He was just enjoying being with somebody,
Yeah.
hanging out, doing something.
Yeah, although to be fair, he's also kind of slutty. So so like I don't think it was completely off the table at any point because he's the kind of a slutty person. But um yeah, it was just yeah, it was not. I mean, we were out. I think maybe it maybe comes down to presence because we were out in a park, so it wasn't like we were gonna duck into the jungle and fuck or something. Like
Oh,
it was just
maybe.
oh god, no. I mean, there's snakes and nettles. And, like, I'm not doing that.
Spiders are the worst.
Yeah, spiders. Um, and I think part of it was that he was just really good at staying in the present moment. Like he's just hanging out, you
Yeah.
know?
And I like that you said so when you're saying a slutty guy, so it's not like he was some guy who's like, oh, I don't know if women will ever want me or be with me. So
Yeah.
he was confident. He's confident about his skills,
Mm.
but he wasn't pressing the
Yeah.
agenda.
Oh, well, I put the word slutty on. I mean, I teased him about being slutty, but I mean, he's just sort of a normal person who dates on Tinder sometimes. That's the
Okay. All
extent.
right.
I mean, slutty compared to me, which I'm like a sex camel. I can just go very long periods of time because everything has to be like just right. Um,
Yeah, speak to
but
that a second. So everything has to be just right. What does that actually mean?
um, I mean, I think it's partly having some kind of like bad experiences as a teenager that made me kind of like put off by people I didn't know well, or men I didn't know well. But also I'm just kind of like that. Like I'm very empathic, and so it's not really pleasant for me to get really intimate with people whose energy doesn't hasn't been sort of vetted. And so that's just always been my speed. I've never had sex with somebody I've known for less than a month. Um, it's
So,
usually longer than that.
so this was the first time?
No, it was maybe like I guess it was the third time that it was like a month before
Yeah.
I like got real with somebody. But it was who knows because we weren't in the same place either. It's weird, like as you get older, you're um, trying new things and having longer relationships. So like there's longer time between. I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know how I grew in 10 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I hear that. When we come out of relationships, we're different.
mhm.
We tend to want to think that, oh, well, this is how I am. I mean, my story about oh my God, I love being single, which is like the craziest thing for me because I fought the first 3 years of single and thinking that I just must be broken from my last relationship until it dawned on me, wait a minute, maybe I actually like this. I keep turning down all these dates and all what's going on? And then I realized, and they're all great guys. And then I realized, holy crap, no, it's me. Like, I'm dating
Yeah.
myself. I'm in love with myself. I'm having the best sex ever. And I love my business. And holy crap, I don't have to think about anybody else, do anything else. I thought I used to be sad for women like this. But I think some of the women I was sad for actually didn't want to be that way. You
There's
know,
a lot of different ways to be single.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And a lot of different ways to be in relationships.
100%. I think that's the thing is most of us try to have these boxes on things. And most of us are told, especially as women, we're supposed to be in a relationship. Like we're not whole and life isn't good until we actually are. And
Yeah.
I think where some people are breaking those paradigms left and right as well. But all right,
Mm.
so because we're coming to a close here now, I love the fact that you've just broken all sorts of paradigms that men are told that don't work.
Oh no, no, your academic job is sexy as fuck. Like your nerdiness is sexy. Your chest hair, God, chest hair. Oh, so the best. Or just little random things that like
It's okay
it,
to
it-
feel like a safe friend.
yeah. Oh
Sexy.
yeah. That's hot. That's actually the foundation of me wanting to have sex with you. Like, Because, you know, and like that's like kind of a detail, like a technical detail in sex. Like if I'm not at ease, I'm not getting aroused. Like I've got
Yeah.
to. There's only so much excitement that has to be balanced with like with the safety, like the
Yeah.
relaxation.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, because arousal and excitement do the same things in the body, but if that safety mechanism isn't there, then it can get scary and turned off fast. And that can lead the
Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah.
guys, hopefully you've heard this here, and I'm having so this women's series thing. Well, I'm not prefacing what we're talking about beforehand. Literally, these are women who I put on my Facebook. I said, "Hey, hetero women, come talk to me about sex, dating, and whatever." I have no idea what these conversations are going to look like, what's going to be in store, but I have to say this first one is already awesome because it really just you know, pretty well flew in the face of everything all men are learning right now about things. Safety being the paramount thing. Wonder what it means to be a safe man. And for most women, being a safe man means that you're not trying to control or push agendas, which flies in the face of being a performative alpha male that takes charge and, sweeps her off and tells her how it's all going to be.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, do some women want a man that slams them up against the wall and takes them? Yes, only after 150 pages of warm up. So here's the thing about women that's weird. Those romance novels, those movies, whatever, where the guy just takes her and slams her up against the wall in a romance novel. Go read some women's romance novels, guys. I'll tell you that right now. Because there's a 150-page buildup to when he quote unquote takes her.
Yeah.
So
That's
there's
actually very funny because, like, the last day of this visit with this specific guy, like, he did try to do the wall thing, but, like, you gotta think technically, dudes, like, the wall is cold.
hard,
Like,
cold, height difference. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong on this.
it was
Putting
like
your
a
head
sexy
against the
idea,
wall. Yeah, there's
but
tons of.
in practice, same with the fucking rose petals. Like, you put them on the bed, it looks nice, but if it's not a warm climate, there's just a bunch of little cold things touching you.
Oh, that's true. So we have demystified the romantic experiences and all the weird flipping postures and stuff like that. Yeah. I
Mhm.
did, there's a study that women are more prone to have an orgasm if their feet are warm. So wearing socks for women is actually the cool thing to do in bed. Who knew? Big, thick wool socks and maybe improving your sex life. Well, Mandy, I want to thank you for showing up and just being game
Oh, it was a pleasure.
jump on here and talk. And hopefully, through these conversations with women, what we're going to find out is a lot of the things you guys think you're supposed to do are probably coming from some man that told you that and not women that you're actually dating or wanting to
Oh my
date.
God. Yeah, can I just close on one line?
Yeah.
Don't do this shit in porn. Just
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
porn is the anti-guide. Just take everything you see in porn and then be like, don't do that.
Don't do the porn stuff, even if, unless you're dating women who are like under 24 or 25 who think they're supposed to be doing the porn stuff and liking the porn stuff and haven't found their voice enough to tell you this sucks. Yeah, just err on the
Yeah,
side of don't do it.
they're
Don't.
actresses.
Yeah.
Job title, they're actresses.
Most of them aren't looking like they are having a good time, even when they're acting as if they should be. So.
So we go back on our
So
they're
guys,
having
no,
so
I,
much
I,
fun.
I ended that episode. I said goodbye. Then we started talking. I'm going to stick this in here. So anyway, so we get off the call. Mandy's like, yeah, yeah. And then she goes, let's get to the nuts and bolts of it. And she started in on oral sex. So Mandy, what do you hate about oral sex? How it's usually done, and what did you love about this dude and his oral sex?
Well, the advice that I've always heard when people get into it, I mean, some of it's great. I mean, some the incorporating larger areas or whatever, like, but they tend to say something like, "Do the alphabet," like do the alphabet with your tongue so that she gets enough variety, or like, um, I
Change
always
it up. Yeah.
I always felt like dudes were like wearing themselves out almost, and this is like. I mean, this is like a little bit weird because bestiality, but like really is more like a dog drinking water. Just
settle
Just
in.
keep it just like it was just simple. Just keep it like soft and simple and warm and silky.
Soft,
And
simple, warm, silky. You don't have to change it up. Don't go over here. Don't jive over there. Then go down, go this, do that. All this changing up too fast, too often.
yeah, or I once had this boyfriend who was a kind of a sex fiend. I mean, he was a great person, but like, why do I have to tell you 20 times? Like every time he would start, I would say softer, like
Oh
softer.
yeah.
But he would never start soft. I'm no, just fucking do it softer. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. No,
Sensitive.
yeah. Actually, there's many, many women that want oral. It's so men better to err starting super soft. Like if you're a tantric master love, oral sex dude, you can
Mm.
literally hold a spitball between your finger and your tongue and not break it while you move it. If you can do that, you can start understanding how to start being an amazing oral sex master. Go harder later if she's pushing into you or saying harder, but better to start really soft. Most women have never had um, the kind of oral sex that was right from the beginning. Most women learn to adapt to the oral sex they're having and try to find pleasure
Yeah.
there. And that's really different than when you can show her right from the get go that she might like this thing that she's never known that is the best oral sex ever.
Yeah. I mean, and I've talked to a few women since then because it really blew my mind because it was like the whole time it was just the silky thing, the warm silky thing because it wasn't too light. There was a lot of contact.
Right,
It wasn't like air
right.
kind of in the mix and getting cold. It wasn't like a feather tongue thing. It was just sort of like a full contact softness, and it was warm and it was rhythmic and it was lovely and it was great. And I'm losing my ability to speak English because I'm nostalgic. It was
So
great. It was so great.
there we go. There's our outro on this episode, guys. And I'm sure there's more. And you'll wait to see what else happens.